My name is Ira Sylvester, this is the Harlequin Room, and this is the 5th time I have started this camera / recording because I wasn't happy with the opening that I gave. That is because even though I have a whole kind of format written out, I am not sticking to it, I ramble too much, I decide that I don't like it, and then I start again. And my goal in life, my goal with this podcast is hopefully before I get to episode 10, that I have the confidence to start this podcast and then just stick with the opening and not worry too much about how I do this, or I ingrain the lessons of how I do this so that I don't have to keep stopping and starting because I'm insecure about these things. Now, this is interesting because when I started this, I was high energy, feeling good, and I was motivated. Ironically, that's kind of what this episode and the following episode is about. However, I then got disturbed, wound up, and frustrated. And essentially, I wouldn't say I had a tantrum because it lasted all of like 2 minutes. And I'm on my own. It's not like I'm like a 4-year-old lying on the ground screaming and kicking and all that lot. However, I am deciding to restart this episode because I felt like the last recording was structured but unpracticed, and because I'm doing a lot of this off the cuff, even though I'm doing the research beforehand, I'm realizing as I'm doing this podcast that the more preparation that goes into the actual podcast, the recording that goes into it first, the less effort it should be in the editing room afterwards. And the editing is what I dislike the most. And so I am realizing as I say this, I would rather start again with the recording than in the editing room have to sift through me going back and forth about the same topic again and again, deciding what I think works and what doesn't work when the takes are themselves almost identical. And it's really interesting because there are some things that we should do and some things that we really shouldn't. So let's take this back to the beginning. Let's reintroduce everything that's going on and redo this because I can, and it's my podcast, and I've got no one else that I need to answer to, and this is just how I want to do it. Let's reintroduce this, and even as I'm saying this is to get my mood back up. Cool, yeah, let's do this. Okay, so today is the 10th of March 2026, and the time is 6 o'clock, 6:01 and 49 seconds. And the first time I started this was at 5:15, so it is 45 minutes later. The recording itself, I am aiming to be about half an hour long. So this is I'm not sure if it's not just the issue with my ADHD type brain. It's just an issue with inexperience that it is hard to accurately assess how long a job is going to take because you can't account for the mistakes and issues that go into it that cause you to have to try everything again from the beginning. And I'm hoping with time that I will be able to just slap on a camera and slap on the mic and record this effortlessly, cleanly, easily, and put it out there. That is, put out something that is worthwhile. But for now, it has taken me a couple tries to do this, and it is frustrating. This whole process, although enjoyable, it does have aspects of it which are extremely fucking irritating. Scripted but flexible. That's the goal. So let's introduce this again, which I think even that I've already said, but it's been 4 minutes and I've said literally nothing except for an honest piece about how difficult I'm finding this whole process. Welcome to the Harlequin Room, a comedic advice podcast for the creatives of this world who are trying to get started and want advice from someone that they would consider not a master, but I don't know, like an older brother in the creative sphere. That's the way I like to describe it the most. Mostly because this sentence actually says a comedic advice podcast for creatives, dreamers, and the spiritually downtrodden, which when I first wrote it sounded nice, upbeat, positive, but as I read it and in the mental state that I'm in now, it's actually just extremely fucking pretentious. And I am very, very aware that I need to be careful that I don't accidentally just disappear up my own arsehole. So as we do this, I am hoping that I am shedding layers of pretentiousness and a character that is inauthentic and honestly just there. My name is Ira Sylvester, if you don't know that for some odd reason. I don't know how you managed to find this if you don't know that, but if you did stumble across it, my name is Ira. I am a comedian with a degree in psychology, which has actually become really, really useful for this episode, and a lifetime ban from my local Indian restaurant because when I told Sanjay I'd like it nice and spicy and he said, do you want it Indian hot? I said, yeah, bring it on, I'm Caribbean. And then he gave me what can only be described as a war crime on rice. And then I had to be dragged out of that place kicking and screaming, which, in all fairness, I was kicking and screaming, and I can see why that might make the other patrons of the restaurant uncomfortable, especially the 6-year-old who was having his birthday. But in all fairness, the people that I was screaming at was mostly my own idiotic self. Like, have you ever really regretted a decision, and then you're angry about it, and you're angry at yourself, but it's really hard to, like, kind of take it out on yourself, so you take it out on other people, because, you know, it's just easier that way. This podcast is about trying to make a life in the creative arts, the ambition, the fear, the delusion, the discipline, what discipline even means, how it's different to motivation. And as I said at the beginning, you know, it's going to be honest and raw, and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes, and then I'm going to get really frustrated with those mistakes, but then I'm going to keep trying to do it again and again and again and again and again. And one thing I have learned about myself recently is that time stresses me out, and as we're making this recording I can actually see the timer and it is 6 minutes 39 seconds, and that's stressing me out because we're still in the intro, and that intro is only supposed to be about 2 or 3 minutes. Oh well. Let's get this started. Let's jump into the meat of this, which I've now actually gone through once already, so this should be a little bit easier. Now, today's episode is about goal setting and bad metrics, right? And the interesting thing about goal setting and metrics is that they're very, very highly related to motivation and discipline. And the next episode is actually meant to be on motivation and discipline, which meant when preparing this episode, it was really hard to distinguish what was most appropriate for here and what is most appropriate for the next episode. So I did manage to use ChatGPT to try and kind of separate my thoughts into 2 episodes, and I'm so glad that thing exists because it was giving me a headache. However, that does mean that this is going to be essentially a 2-parter episode. This will be necessary for the next episode, and I will preface next episode with the fact that you should listen to this one first to really get the full idea about what's going on, right? When it comes to goals, there is an issue that is, I wouldn't say necessarily plagues our society, but there is something that's difficult, and that is, when you're young, everyone tells you to have dreams, ambitions, goals in life, but there's very little practical advice, at least in my experience, that tells you exactly how to set a goal. What is a good goal? What goes into creating an actionable, clear, and structured plan? It's all well and nice being able to structure an essay, but trying to structure your life is vastly more complicated and comes with so many more so many more unexpected variables just out of the blue. So how do you account for all of that, especially when you're not just when for the normal people, but for the neurodivergent out there? How do we make sense of the world and sense of ourselves and put this into something that seems achievable without losing motivation, then self-esteem and determination? And how do we become disciplined? That is what I'm going to help you achieve with this. Hopefully there are way more ways that you can do this, but these are the ways that really work for me, and maybe they will work for you too, right? The first thing that a lot of people get wrong when it comes to goals is they think that goals are meant to be achieved. Let me be clear. Goals are not necessarily meant to be achieved. Goals can be seen as a kind of North Star. They are your guiding principles. What is more important than achieving goals is having consistent behavior. My girlfriend always complains about my drinking behavior, and I say, well, you know what? I might not be drinking less, I might be drinking too much, but you know what? At least my behavior is consistent, and consistent behavior gets results. This will make more sense later. Before you understand what a good goal looks like, you need to understand how behavior works. And behavior works through 5 main factors that is called, we're going to look at this, we're going to look at something that we call the action funnel. The action funnel is based on 5 different things, right? You've got awareness, desires, it's awareness, decision, planning, starting, and persistence. Awareness is just knowing something's there. Oh, people make podcasts. I should make a podcast. And then there's the actual decision of going, I should make a podcast. You know, I will make a podcast. That's the decision. And then the planning is how and when. I'm going to make a podcast in my attic. And I am going to do this in the near future. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. And that's where a lot of us get stuck. You know, it's we know that something exists. We know we want to do something, and then we know that how roughly we would do it. But actually starting something, which is step 4 of the action funnel, and pursuing that, i.e. continuing on, persistence with that, is the 2 aspects that we find really, really, really difficult. And that's where motivation and discipline come in. We're going to get to this, right? Most goals, the point that I'm trying to make is that most goals fail before they get to stage 4. People stop with good intentions. And the main reason why big goals fail is a lot of the time these things are really, really abstract. An abstract goal is hard to fathom. It's hard to really kind of put into concrete words, actions, whatever, right? So ideas like, I want to be successful, I want to grow an audience, I want to be more confident, they are bad goals. They are great vibes, but they lack structure, they lack clarity, they're not necessarily achievable. What do you mean, I want to grow an audience? Well, how do you decide once you've grown an audience? It's like, if one person watches, if I go into the street and I start screaming and, you know, like the police get called and people start gathering around and all that, does that mean I've grown my audience because there are people there? It's like, no, it's like, I'm being facetious to make a point, you know? It's like, what does it mean to actually have an audience? What are these metrics? How do we achieve these types of things? And one way that people do this is through what's known as SMART goals. SMART goals are great. They're not the be all end all, but they are great. It's actually how I structure my goals for the year. And first, let's describe what SMART goals are. SMART goals it's an acronym, and it stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Which, some people say timely as well, actually. Otherwise, it would be SMART-B. And a bad goal would be grow my audience, as I just said. However, rephrase that into a SMART goal, and that would be, I am going to post 3 stand-up clips per week for the next 12 weeks. Now, why do we do that? That is because specifically what we want to do is grow an audience, but that is what's known as an outcome metric. That is hard to measure, like what counts as actually growing. So we have to look at what comes before that, which is the behaviors and things that need to be done to grow that audience. A version of that could be, assuming that it's online, right? A version of that could be posting clips on a regular basis because that has proven to increase follower count, right? So then you go, okay, so I need to post clips to grow my audience, but that's not quite enough. That's specific, but it's not quite measurable. Okay, so how do you know you've been posting clips? It's like, well, I am going to post, we're saying 3 clips a week to grow my audience. It's like, okay, cool, that's great. That is now specific, it's measurable, it's achievable. You know, it's like, I can't post 7 clips because that might be like a clip every single day, and that's just too much. Or maybe 1 clip is very, very achievable, but you know, maybe it can be better. You need to make sure that you're just trying to push yourself to achieve as much as you can in a realistic fashion. So if 7 is too much, 3 might seem more realistic. So now it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant because it's specifically going to your goal. But then the final one, timely or time bound, is 12 weeks. So post 3 stand-up clips per week for 12 weeks. That gives you it's a trick that it's a thing that your mind needs to have a kind of close off loop. If you feel like you're going to do something but it's going to go on forever and ever and ever and ever, that can be demotivating because it feels kind of like a Sisyphean task. It's like pushing a boulder up the hill endlessly with no kind of end in sight. You need to have an end in sight. You don't necessarily need to have an end in sight, but we're going to get to that, right? And it's actually this is a great start, but that last little bit there is actually one of the downfalls of the SMART goals. Another example that you could see with this, and I do generally find this really, really useful and would suggest this to other people. I do SMART goals for the year. So every kind of October, November, December, I start kind of reassessing what my year has been like, and then I set goals for the following year. So here, for example, I have got what I call SMART Goals 2026. And so I break this down into 4 categories. So these 4 categories are show, professional, creative, and personal. Now, your categories will be whatever they are for you, but my most important aspects in my life are about the shows that I'm trying to put on, the professional, the creative, and the personal. So, for example, the shows that I'm focusing on this year are The Burn Show, which is this idea that I've got about material I'm trying to get rid of, Black Sparrow, which is a debut hour, and this cabaret idea show that I'm really, really looking forward to, but it's going to go sometime in the future. Then I've got professional, which is pitch this TV show thing that I'm working on, get my face on the billboard above Proud Mary, and get a pay rise. Get a pay rise, but basically get more consistent work within the comedy. And then, so these are specific aspects that will be done throughout the rest of the year. And then some of them things like post 10 podcast episodes, build YouTube to 100 subscribers. These are all relevant to my overarching goals of becoming a comedian, like a full-time professional comedian, and they're linked for a year. Now, again, this kind of goes back to what I was saying before. The reason why I am not worried, like they are trying to be specific, measurable, achievable, related, and time-bound. But again, these aren't necessarily meant to be achieved. In fact, some of these are repeats from last year. But the reason why I have these is because from time to time I will get overwhelmed with everything that I'm trying to do. And having these North Star goals, they really, really help kind of settle me and help me kind of stay on a specific track. So when I'm getting wound up and wrapped up in all these like little things, I kind of stop, I breathe, and I look at my goals for the year, and then I think to myself, okay, all these little things that I'm doing, where have I gotten distracted? What is actually taking me to the goals that I set out for my year, and what is just something that is nonsense, that is just I've picked up for some reason because it's new and it just feels important because it's new, because that's how my brain kind of organizes things, and what actually is like what is serving me. And this can be really useful because it kind of just it calms you down, you kind of reset, you don't feel as guilty for dropping certain things that you've picked up. So this kind of moves me on to the limitation of SMART goals, and that is SMART goals create clarity, but they don't solve the biggest problems, which is the starting and continuing, step 4 and 5 in the action funnel. And that is, you can have perfectly designed goals, you can have all the kind of metrics worked out and all these but then you still end up procrastinating. And why do you end up procrastinating? And that can be related to the thing called self-determination theory, but essentially it's about your sense of autonomy, your like kind of sense of self, your motivation for doing something, like is it like kind of deep down useful to you, and whether or not this is like kind of meaningful / related to others. And the way that you get around this is by incorporating these goals into your sense of identity, which we're very swiftly moving into the motivation and discipline aspects. And I'm going to try and stay away from that a little bit because I'm going to be talking about that so much in the next episode. Instead, I'm going to focus more on the the psychological and scientific aspects of goal setting, like what different goals are. So there are two main types of goals, right? You've got input goals and you've got outcome goals. Input goals are related to effort, behavior, things that you are actionable type things, right? Outcome goals are less in your control. They are goals to be achieved. For example, 500,000 views on a video or 3,000 followers, things like that, you know, like they're results to be achieved. And because those results to be achieved are out of your control, they are not super useful to creatives or creators fields. Like when the scenario or whatever it is that you're working in is predictable, these traditional kind of goals and these traditional kind of metrics are fantastic. However, when you have a lot of variables that are unpredictable, for example, whenever you will be in the favor of the algorithm or what clip goes viral, which you don't have control over, it can really mess with you, mess with motivation. It can mess with kind of like the plans that you have, and it can just be just overwhelming, overbearing, and just annoying, right? So how you deal with this is with something called OKRs. Now, OKRs are fairly new, overtaking SMART goals and things like that, but it's used already by like Google, and actually I've got this written down, used in companies like Google, and apparently I didn't write down the other companies because fuck them. OKRs stand for objectives and key results. The objective is the direction. This is the North Star that I was talking about before. It is the idea of like, where are we aiming? What's the direction that we're going in? And the key results are how we measure progress. So we've got to think about it as this is the ultimate goal, and then we find smaller milestones that we try to reach in the act of trying to achieve this bigger goal at the end. An example of this would be if your objective is to build an online audience for your stand-up, then the key results could be 3 different parts. They could be post 3 clips per week, which would be an input goal. And then you could have reached 250,000 views, which would be an output goal. And then you could have gained 3,000 followers, which would be another output goal. The input goals and the input results, they are how you track your behavior and make sure that you are consistent. The output results measure whether or not the output results are to measure whether or not your strategy is working. So again, and with the risk of repeating myself a little bit, creative work has a lot of uncertainty. So where you focus on what you can control and kind of measure what you can't control. OKRs are doing exactly that, where they allow for a lot of experimentation and adjustment on the fly to adapt to situations, changing scenarios, and so you can carry on working towards your overall goal without getting bogged down in kind of arbitrary bullshit. OKRs say control the inputs and monitor the outputs. If outputs don't move, you adjust the strategy, not the effort. If you stay low after 12 weeks, the lesson isn't work harder. The lesson might be the clips need better hooks, or your editing style needs improvement, or posting times are wrong, or I don't know, you're ugly. When you learn what is and isn't in your control when trying to achieve your goals, then you allow yourself the opportunity to improve upon yourself, as opposed to just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, in the sense that if you know what you can change, what you can manage, and that contributes to the sense of autonomy and like kind of feeling of effectiveness, that contributes to that feeling of like, I can achieve this, I can do this. And we do that by making things clear, manageable, and actionable. Clear, manageable, actionable. CMA. That's not a thing, but maybe it could be. I do these things by a year. I do my SMART goals by a year, but I actually have a 6-month revision. And I actually found out while researching for this episode that there is this thing called the 12-week year, and how the 12-week year works is that instead of looking at our goals in a year-long spectrum. We look at our goals in 12-week periods, or otherwise quarters. It's exactly what business do. Quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. It's 3 months. Every 3 months you adjust these type of things. And the reason why this works is because long timelines just absolutely murder urgency. So when you've got an ADHD type brain or something similar to that, if you say to yourself, this year I'm going to do ... that is not useful, because a year is a very, very long time. And if you're anything like me, you don't get any work done until the absolute last minute. So if I've got a year to do something, you best believe everything's getting done in December. So what we do is we change our timelines to be much, much shorter, the 12-week year. So instead of one yearly reset, you get 4 individual resets per year. This really plays into how you turn a kind of creative mindset, flow, work into a kind of business. This is the business of show business. This is the actionable, where the autistics meet the ADHD brain. The idea being you kind of trick yourself, i.e. you give yourself more urgency, you give yourself more opportunities for feedback, and you keep your momentum going, you keep your momentum up. This very much leads me into the identity-based motivation. And this is the deeper layer of goal setting. Identity. Identity connects behavior to purpose, not just reward. I.e., right, think about this. Instead of asking, what do I want to achieve? You have to ask yourself, who do I want to become? For example, I want to try podcasting versus I am someone who makes a podcast. The change in mindset is subtle, but it's very significant. Let's use another example. We're going to compare 2 motivations. One motivation is external. I should post clips to grow followers. The other motivation is identity-based. I'm someone who shares my comedy with the world. The second is more powerful because it aligns with the principles of self-determination, or self-determination theory, which is this thing called SDT. It's what I mentioned earlier on, and also something that I'm going to go into more detail in the next episode. But just to reiterate, self-determination theory boils down to 3 key concepts, which is autonomy, i.e. I chose this, competence, I'm developing skills, and relatedness, I connect with others, and how I connect with others. These 3 things need to be settled. These 3 things need to be fulfilled for you to keep kind of motivation and therefore discipline, and therefore kind of keep to your actual plans. And when you identify your goals with all 3 of these aspects, that's when they become most effective. So why does identity matter? Identity matters for a plethora of reasons. Identity stabilizes motivation, it reduces decision fatigue, and it shapes what your brain notices. When a behavior becomes part of who you are, it stops feeling like effort. It starts feeling like it's natural. It's a writer, a comedian makes jokes. It's just kind of what you do. It's not something you really think about. It's incorporated into just everything. It's like I can't help myself but make jokes. In fact, sometimes I really, really should try and help myself from making jokes because it gets me in trouble. Basically, you're trying to remove the need for motivation. The action continues because it isn't about forcing yourself. It's simply what you do. You're maintaining your identity rather than pushing through resistance. Humans naturally prefer actions that are self-reaffirming. They need to confirm your sense of self. The principle is known as self-verification theory. When your behavior aligns with your sense of self, your personality, your identity, it is comfortable. It is psychologically comfortable. But when your behavior is against what feels like who you are, it creates this kind of tension inside, and that's not really nice. Humans naturally prefer actions that confirm their sense of self, that feel natural to who they are. Because when we act out of character, when we act out of what we see as our nature, it creates this kind of psychological tension. And that psychological tension is super, super uncomfortable. And that discomfort is what nudges us back to the behaviors that feel like they're more us, more relevant to the way that we should be doing things. So if you can change what that baseline nature or identification, whatever that identification is, then that allows behaviors to kind of be done without need for energy. For a comedian, that means that everyday life becomes material. Observations, conversations, it's like your brain kind of naturally picks up on what is most salient, which is what is most kind of significant, what is most kind of within your purview. This is making me trying to sound like I'm sounding like I'm trying to be pretentious, but honestly, I can't think of what the goddamn word is. I say all of that to say this. The real purpose of goals is not achievement, it's identity construction. Each completed goal is evidence that reinforces a belief. This is who I am. Over time, that belief becomes stable. That belief becoming stable is you forming that sense of identity. So the goals no longer are things that you are seeking to achieve, that you have to write down, that you have to work towards. They just become part of your daily routine. They become part of who you are. Essentially, it takes the effort out of things because you're no longer having to make decisions. You're no longer having like kind of decision fatigue. You're no longer having to think about things. It's just you just do things, and that's what it really is. Have you ever seen someone who goes to the gym like all the time, like religiously, and you're like, how do they have the motivation to go to the gym even when they've had such a long day and all this kind of stuff? It's all about mind frame. It's all about restructuring things so they don't really feel like they are effort. It's about restructuring things so they just come naturally to you, so they just are part of who you are and what you do. And figuring out who you want to be, like I said in the first episode, is difficult, but it can be enjoyable if you don't pressure yourself if you don't pressure yourself to solve things immediately. I hope you have been enjoying the podcast so far, but now we just need a very, very quick word from our sponsors.
This is Buddy, and this is Stephen. They are two very innocent aloe vera plants. What would you do if you saw a murder happening and knew that you could stop it with a small donation of just 5,000 kroner a day? Ira originally got these aloe vera plants because he believed that they were hard to kill. However, Ira doesn't know what he's doing. With your small donation, you will give Ira the confidence and the skills he needs to buy as many plants as necessary to give the illusion that he hasn't killed a single one. Please, donate today to Cacti Can Do This with your help.
For audio listeners, please understand that there are 2 cacti plants on the screen and they are about to die very, very soon. With your small donation, you will be able to save these cacti plants, or at least give Ira the money so they can buy enough cacti plants to pretend like he wasn't going to kill them in the first place.
Back to you, me. Now we've got the Agony Uncle section, which I have decided to call the HR breakdown, because it kind of sounds like there's a breakdown in HR. Jokes are only funnier when you explain them, Ira. I've got 2 questions from 2 people, and they're quite interrelated, so I'm going to say what they are, and then I'm going to answer both of them at once. So the first question is from Eric, and he goes, "Hi Ira, hope the podcast is going well." It is going well, Eric, thank you very much. I don't know if my quandary can be relevant since I am not a person working in a creative field, but at the moment, the whole question of finding out what I want to do with my life is really pressing, especially professionally, and I want to know if you have any ideas, and I am finishing my studies in half a year, so I thought maybe it could serve as a basis for some humour-filled advice. And the second question is from Tom Sawyer. Tom Sawyer is a comedian. He's also known as Tom the Slapstick King. Find him on Instagram. I believe he's got a show coming out soon, actually. He's really, really funny. He's just really, really funny. So he has a show, and you can get tickets to his show at tomsawyer.com. Check him out on Instagram, on TikTok and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure he'll really make you laugh. He is Norwegian. I think a lot of his shows are in Norwegian, but there might be some stuff in English as well, so check that out too. Tom Sawyer's qualms are how to choose the projects that are good projects and how to stick to it, instead of starting new stuff and not following through. Started new comedy clubs, started new podcasts, I can relate to that, started some new account. Okay, so the 2 questions are essentially, I am trying to work out what I want to do in my life professionally, and the other question is, how do we choose good projects? And this kind of relates back to what I was saying at the beginning, so I'll try and say this concisely in answer to these questions. I don't know what to do with my life professionally. This would be an example of the objective. This is the overall arching goal. Now, how you decide what your overall arching goal is, I would just suggest explore. Just explore until you find what is right for you. Try out a bunch of things and then check back in with yourselves and see what feels right. What you can also do, I guess, actually, is work out what's important to you. Just literally list out what's important to you and then see if you can draw like kind of Venn diagrams and see like where they link up and what they kind of cross over. Where it's like, what do I enjoy doing? What does the world need? And like kind of that bit in between that you can also make money off of. That should probably be what you do professionally. For me, that's being a comedian. And then with Tom, this is kind of, if Eric's question is the overall objective, Tom's question is how to choose the projects like and stick to it. Those smaller projects should serve a function that reaches that end goal. Obviously, I've talked about that whole notion of do what feels natural, do what feels right. And yes, obviously, if you're doing something for its own sake, it's never the wrong project. If you're enjoying it, you're doing the right thing. But if it's about trying to stay on track and what works, it would be, I would suggest use the OKRs, where you've got the objective and then key results. So what is your overall goal and what projects directly serve that overall goal? If they don't serve that overall goal, they're super fun, but put them to the side. Put them on the back burner for a little while. Basically, it's break it down. See what projects work towards your actual goals. I'm not going to give the examples that I have for myself because I don't think that's necessarily useful. The best projects are the ones that help you achieve what your overall goal are and something that you can stick to comfortably. The best workout is the one that you do. Oh, I actually wrote some key notes here. Yeah, so understand what your motivation is and it will help you clarify what your ultimate goal is. Then work out which projects aim most towards that goal and put the others on the back burner. Ah, there we go. I can be concise sometimes. Finally. Oh, look, we're already at the end. That was actually much easier. I feel better this time. And now for my recommendations of the week / month / whatever the hell this is. Firstly is a book called Drive, and I've got the name of the author written down here somewhere. Yeah, Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us by Daniel H. Pink. This is probably the best introduction you can have to self-determination theory if you're not an academic. And it basically shows you like, it describes motivation in like a deep way. And kind of explains what autonomy is, mastery, and purpose, and like kind of how you find meaning. And like kind of these are all terms that I kind of glossed over a little bit in this episode, and we'll go more into next episode. But they are very much about goal setting. I think one of the main things is what you have to understand as well is that when it comes down to goals, it's more about understanding motivation and discipline, and the goals are just more of a directive. And this book goes really well into explaining the link between those two and why it's so useful. And yeah, in terms of a podcast, if you don't particularly want to read or you can't find an audiobook, I'd actually suggest the Andrew Huberman podcast. He's got some really, really good episodes about kind of motivation, the science behind it, discipline, goal setting and all that lot. And don't get me wrong, there is an ever so slight element of bro science in it. However, he is a very good academic. He's a fantastic speaker. And quite frankly, when it comes down to psychological things, everything has to be taken with a pinch of salt anyway. So you can't ever say that this proves that. And he does a really good job of explaining what the current science is and the limitations of a lot of studies. So yeah, obviously listen to him and to a degree make up your own mind about what you want to take as gospel. But it's very useful and you can learn a lot from both of those things. If you made it this far, thank you so much. It means a lot. If you liked it, then please give it 5 stars, do all that kind of stuff. Let the algorithm know that I exist because I've just started out and I'm going to keep going whether you like it or not. But at the same time, it really helps out and it also lets me know if I'm doing a good job sometimes. Yes, I will keep doing the input, but the outcome is kind of down to you, I guess. So that'd be pretty nifty. If you also enjoyed it, you can share it with your friends and family and loved ones and all that kind of stuff. If you didn't enjoy it, you can fuck off. I don't know, man. Yeah, just if you didn't enjoy it, then I'm sorry, but it is what it is. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe, do whatever that stuff is, and I will see you in the next episode. But actually, one more thing as well is if you want more of these thoughts and all that lot, consider signing up to my newsletter, because I am getting into the habit of essentially taking I do a lot of research for these episodes, and I'm just going to essentially just take everything that I've researched and using for the recording and just whip it up into like kind of a written format so that people can see it and like kind of read it at their own pace and look things up and all that kind of stuff. Because I don't know if you're anything like me, but sometimes I like listening to stuff. Sometimes I like kind of seeing it written down because I can wrap my head around it better. And I think it will be useful. So if you enjoy that or you want that, then sign up to my newsletter, follow me on Instagram, all that kind of shit. In the meantime, though, thank you very much. And yeah, this one was less than an hour. Only took me 5 episodes to manage to turn a half-hour podcast into something that was less than an hour. That is a win. Peace.